So just to start off, I wanted to say thank you, and also thank you for inviting me personally to sit through the beginning part of this meeting, not just to come and speak as a guest slot, because it's been so inspiring and so encouraging hearing all these different ways that we're discussing true balance and inclusivity. And I appreciate you may wonder why, with a morning where the theme is all around, predominantly around male allyship. What I'm going to talk to you about, because Refuge, as some of you may know, is a provider of specialist services specifically for women and their children. But men are a hugely important part of that conversation. This isn't women's problem to solve, it's society's problem, and we're all part of society. So what I'm going to talk you through today, and I appreciate we're coming close to time, so I'll try and be as swift as possible, is an overview of Refuge, who we are, what we do, the problem that we exist to tackle. And then I'm going to talk to you about, obviously in my role, you can imagine my real passion is partnerships, the power of partnership with businesses and with individuals within those businesses. So I'm going to talk to you about that, how that obviously intersects with the discussion around having allies who are men within our partnerships in society at large, and to signpost you in the direction of, if you are interested, to support the conversations that we can have about a partnership. So before I even start, I suspect it's clear that I will be talking to you about domestic abuse and issues relating to violence against women and girls. So I understand that that could be triggering for some people, or an uncomfortable or difficult thing to listen to. So if that is the case, please don't feel any worry about ducking out at any point or switching off. We completely understand, because there are some difficult topics of difficult subject matters in here. So next slide, please. This may look like a very old-fashioned picture to start with, and indeed it is. This is a picture that dates from 1971, when we opened the door of our very first refuge for women and children fleeing abuse, and that was in Chiswick in West London. I understand that was in fact the world's first refuge for women and children in that situation. So 50 years on, where we're sitting today, I appreciate one of the things that our raison d'etre here in this group, in this community, is that we're talking about, is that we are not there yet with gender equality, with gender balance. There's still work to be done. But of course, one of the hugely positive things about the very fact that we're sitting in this Zoom room today is that we are worlds away from where we were in 1971, when domestic abuse was viewed as a private matter, when it happened behind closed doors, and often, sadly, it was viewed as something quite normal within a relationship. So thankfully, we have spent 50 years changing women's lives, shining a light on domestic abuse, working really hard with our campaigning and advocacy to change society. So we are seeing a huge change. But if you go to the next slide, what you'll see is that, shockingly and sadly, the scale of the problem of domestic abuse is still enormous. In fact, it's the biggest problem probably facing women in society today. So if you don't mind clicking, you will see that a couple of numbers are going to come up, and that is 1 in 4 women is the number of women who will experience domestic abuse in our lifetimes, still today in England and Wales, and that's a pre-COVID statistic, so we can only imagine that's increased. The second number that you'll see coming up is 1.6, which is the number of women who therefore experienced domestic abuse in the UK in 2019, which is our most up-to-date figure. And the final number here is 2 women a week. And that is the average number of women every week who are murdered by their current or former partner. On top of that, 3 more on average take their own lives as a result of domestic abuse. 5 women a week. I talk about this a lot, it's my job day to day, but that still shocks me. If 5 women every week were losing their lives in any other arena of public life, at a football match, for instance, or on the London Underground or the Manchester trams, we would be up in arms. And well, the good news is we are up in arms, and our partners are as well, and we are working incredibly hard to support the women who experience domestic abuse, to prevent, as far as we possibly can, instances of domestic abuse, and a lot of that is around societal change. And I wanted to include this because this shows actually the range of different types of abuses that we encounter with the women and the children that we support, and that obviously our services are tailored to to meet that need and to support these women. So I won't read to you what's on the slide. I appreciate we're a little short on time, but I did want to have a quick focus on technological abuse, because I appreciate we spoke earlier in this session about women in tech. And technological abuse is an area of abuse that is incredibly relevant right now, because I'm sure, as we've all been aware, that just as we're sitting here now on a digitally enabled meeting, we have spent more and more of our lives, particularly over the last year and a half, using digital media, using tech to interface with everyday life. Now, Refuge is incredibly pro-tech. We believe that women should be fully empowered as everybody else on an equal footing within society to be able to use tech in absolutely any and every aspect of their life. So we do not agree with what various institutions in the past have said around just switch off your social media, come off social media, don't engage with tech if technology is being misused to abuse, stalk and harass women, which it is increasingly. But what we do is we have a specialist service that has existed since 2017 to support women to live safely and fully technologically enabled in our society, and also to work really, really technically and forensically to look at the evidence trail when abuse is being perpetrated, because it's not as simple as, for example, being tracked and followed via social media. Or even of having devices hacked and apps, utilised without the victim's knowledge. It's actually a lot more insidious than that. We see incidences where the Internet of Things is used, so home heating devices, for example. There was a woman in one of our refuges who I was speaking to one of my colleagues about, who, before she moved with her 2 young children to our refuge, where she lived with her partner, he would turn off all the heating, hot water and electricity at night until he got home, giving her only an hour to go and get her children from school, her 2 young children, run them home and feed them, bath them, get them to bed. Only an hour, where the school was a 20-minute walk away, for her to make that journey and do all of that in the evening before he would turn everything off via the remote device. She had no control, and she would sit in the dark and the cold in winter until he came home and switched it on again. So every layer of life being controlled through so many different means. So this is kind of the scale and the scope of the problem in a snapshot that we're tackling. So what are we doing about it? Well, just briefly on the next slide, you can see that we have a range of services. So we are not only refuges, we do have 48 secure location refuges across the country to house women and children who are fleeing abuse. But through both those refuges and our community outreach services, which support women wherever they're living, we support around 7,000 women and children on any given day. And that is an uplift of about 500 on any given day since before COVID. We run the National 24-hour Domestic Abuse Helpline, which is the gateway to domestic abuse services nationally, wherever you are, whoever you are, and we are there 24 hours a day with multiple linguistic provision. During the pandemic, we also during the lockdown, we also launched a more inclusive digital platform for that, whereby women who may not find it safe to talk if they're locked down in their home with a perpetrator can access digitally via a live chat. And that's also more inclusive for women who might have auditory difficulties or may not be able to physically speak on the phone. We've increased our linguistic provision, something we want and need to do further, but that's dependent on funding as well. And of course, on the other side of our services, which are around gender-based violence more broadly, we have culturally specific services, we have modern slavery services, we have linguistically specific services. So it's really, really broad. And all of this is underpinned by our national and global campaigning and awareness raising. So on the next slide, you will see 2 campaigns where we've done this. One, the Naked Threat campaign, has recently changed legislation. We've just had within the draft domestic abuse bill, threatening to share intimate images made a criminal offence, due in part to our lobbying campaigning. And the second picture there is the No Economic Abuse campaign, which is a huge campaign that we have done in collaboration with one of our amazing corporate partners, the Cooperative Bank, who also fund us, but also work on this campaign with research, with advocacy, to really change the face. We've changed some FCA regulations. And that project is ongoing, and we couldn't do that without our partner. I don't have a visual for this one, but something that I do want to talk about briefly here in terms of the power of campaigning and shared voices, which really ties into the subject matter of today, is that piece around male allyship. And it is so very important. As I said, we deal at Refuge specifically with women who are impacted by domestic abuse. So, we're dealing with a problem that women face. However, as I said, it is not for women alone to solve, it is society's problem. And empowering men to be part of that conversation, to be part of that change, is absolutely vital. And it's something that I am hugely passionate about. As you can imagine, in corporate partnerships, we work with businesses of all different types, all different sectors, and a lot of businesses have very large numbers of men in their workforce. And whilst we work with those businesses to champion and promote gender balance at all levels, we absolutely want to engage men in an inclusive way in this conversation. And the power that when men feel that, Daniele talked about men feeling sort of empowered to have their voices heard in the right way. And it's a mixture of being able to support and empower men to model the right behaviours, to lead by example. Men who have children or have family members who are young children are also modelling the behaviours of tomorrow by influencing the behaviour of the next generation, but also the power of men feeling confident to call out behaviours when it's not right. That is hugely important. And to that end, that's one of those conversations that we have within our corporate partnerships, within those arenas where there are a lot of men who support us. But we also, and I'll share the link to this in the chat, we started doing this on a broader kind of public scale with an article on International Women's Day in partnership with GQ magazine in the UK, which was all about men's allyship for our work and for obviously gender balance more broadly. So really important piece of our work and of the picture and how we engage with our partners. So moving on to the next slide, just to give you an idea, hopefully, of the power of our partnerships. So this is just a quick snapshot to show you the diversity of the businesses who we work with, and we work with them in a number of different ways. So some of you will be familiar with some of our very high profile campaigns, like I've just mentioned, the Cooperative Bank with No Economic Abuse, which was the previous phase was My Money, My Life in 2015. Benefit's Bold is Beautiful campaign in collaboration with another charity, the wonderful Look Good, Feel Better. You may have visited Picture House cinemas pre-lockdown and seen the incredible hide and seek film raising funds and awareness. But we also work with other major banks like Barclays, for example, have just funded some incredibly transformational projects of our work. With tech, we brought on board our very first tech partner this year with Avast, the antivirus company, which was so exciting, and they're doing some amazing things with us, as well as funding our tech service. And we were very happy to be one of the charities involved in ICAP Day this year. So these are just to name but a few. And Alighieri, you see, a jewellery brand founded by the incredible owner and entrepreneur Rosh Martani, who are supporting us through some pieces to commemorate our 50th anniversary, some pieces of beautiful jewellery that are sold in aid of Refuge. So there's a really broad spectrum there. And on the next slide, I won't talk you through it, but it just gives you an idea of if you are interested, as I hope many of you will be, in joining our movement and in being part of that corporate power for change, because there is so much power. We're very conscious that businesses, really, as I think it was, as Hyru said earlier, businesses are comprised of people. Businesses are really fundamental with our work to drive change, both within best practice within their own sectors and industries themselves, but also, really galvanizing that power, that passion and that interest that there are of those individuals that make up those businesses. So there are lots of ways that you could get involved as a business, ranging from, that side of employee engagement, and we support in turn with safety messages, with lots of talks, with lots of information to support both your staff well-being, in the context of, abuse, or supporting friends who may be experiencing that, but also that bigger gender balance conversation that's so important. But a lot of our partnerships are also incredibly commercial. They're very either B2C or B2B, but we look at ways that really integrate within the core purpose of your business and how that can be meaningful, supporting a charity that really kind of integrates and becomes part of the DNA of that business, whereby you can also support us with some of our frontline work, by funding and also by campaigning, or by doing lots of other things. So we can have as you can see, there's quite a big variety there of ways that you can get involved. And just to touch before I finish on the next slide, as I said, we are very aware that we talk about corporate partnerships and we partner with businesses. That's my team's raison d'etre. But every business, as I said, is made up of individuals, and not every individual, our businesses might be giving, 5-figure, 6-figure sums, but we want every single individual in that business to feel involved, to feel empowered, and to feel part of that change. So I've just included a few of these numbers here to show you that if you as a company decide to invest in supporting refuge, and I use that word deliberately, we've recently commissioned a study to look at the social impact more broadly of our work. So not just the pence in the pound that we spend directly on frontline services, but the social return. And we know that for every pound that Refuge spends on our services, we generate £8.24 of social return. So from the perspective of investment in societal change, not just through the campaigning side, but also directly your financial support, we make a big difference. But equally, every individual who puts £5 in a pot or does a fun run makes a huge difference. So that, the idea that £13 really does pay for an expert from our National Domestic Abuse Helpline to respond to a call or a contact. I mean, that's a vital lifeline. £52 for one night of emergency accommodation for a woman and her children fleeing abuse. Every single person is part of that change and part of that difference if you choose to work with us. So just to finish, I want to say a big thank you for including Refuge today, for listening to me. And two key things to leave you with. One, which I mentioned, our National Domestic Abuse Helpline, but I was a bit negligent. I didn't give you the number. If anybody here is concerned about anybody, themselves or others, or worried about domestic abuse, our national helpline is here for you 24/7, and the number is 0808 2000 24/7. So please do be aware of that, or visit our website refuge.org.uk for the range of our services and how to access them. But on the other side of that, if you would like to talk to me about engaging in a partnership with us or supporting us, please do. Those are my details and the details of our corporate inbox. We would love to hear from you and talk to you about how you can be part of this movement for change. Thank you.